I'm Jon and this is Dustin Rozario Steinhagen. Are you a
I
Steinhagen or a Steenhagen?
uh my family always said Steinhagen.
Steinhagen.
I know there's
Okay.
different pronunciations of
Yeah.
the Stein. So
Yeah. So it's a German origin, isn't it? So
yep.
the second in an EI, it's the I that's pronounced, and in the IE, it's the E that's pronounced E. Or I. Well, anyway, I'm glad I'm not really glad at all about that. But so you have a doctorate in cybersecurity, and you wanted to share some interesting points with us. Start wherever you like.
Sure. I thought it would be cool to do I guess one thing I've been thinking about recently is advancements in artificial intelligence.
Mm.
So I wouldn't claim to be an expert in AI, but I've been looking at recent developments and just kind of daydreaming about the subject, and I have some interesting things to share.
Mm.
And on top of that, uh, or I guess kind of a recap in case people didn't watch the previous time I appeared on your show. As part of my dissertation, I created a thought reform literacy curriculum. So essentially quizzing lay people in South Dakota about their knowledge on thought reform, psychologically manipulative groups, and
Mm.
related subjects. So I thought it'd be fun to see if ChatGPT could take that test and see how it performed. So we can talk about that later in our talk.
Yeah, talk about that now if you like, because what a
Sure.
fascinating idea. So you did a
Yeah, we can.
survey on people to see how well they understood, that manipulation is happening, if they understood that manipulation is happening, and you tried to. There were quite a lot of criteria, and to the surprise of all concerned, people do know that it's happening. The majority of people know that it's happening, and I think you had about 2% of people or something who don't think that it's possible to manipulate somebody psychologically, but everybody else. So how did ChatGPT fare with the questions? Does it know that it's being manipulated?
Sure. And I had pretty high expectations
Mm,
for ChatGPT, so I was expecting it to get a perfect score actually,
yeah,
because it
it
does.
has
And we can
access
talk
to the
about that.
information. Yeah.
Yeah, and we can talk about some other kind of domains that it's excelled in. But just a little bit of background here. It was mid-December when I quizzed it, and this was the ChatGPT 4.0 Omni model.
Mm.
I mainly just mentioned that in case future researchers watch this video. Um, so there was 47 potential questions on the thought reform literacy questionnaire, and it got a score of 46 out of 47. So, and another thing to keep in mind is I chose ChatGPT uh, and not the Microsoft Copilot or a different model. I wanted to make sure it wasn't pulling answers from the internet because my dissertation is openly available on the web.
Mm.
So
Yes.
that was one thing to control for. And I looked up they call it a knowledge cutoff in AI, where it's the latest point at which a model is trained,
Mm.
like it's training data. So the knowledge cutoff was before my dissertation was published.
Okay.
So and when you're in the ChatGPT interface, it does tell you on any given response if it's searching the web.
Mm.
So I can confirm that for the 47 questions at least, it wasn't searching the web for the answers.
Mm.
So it was based on its training data. So it and one thing I should mention is that that score of 46 out of 47 was the highest score that any human got in my South Dakota sample. So no one's ever scored 47 out of 47 yet. Um, so the question that it got wrong was interesting. It was actually there was a question on how many people in the world are currently being psychologically
Mm.
manipulated, and it was orders of magnitude. So there's four answers. It was zero people for one answer. I think it was thousands, but less than, or yeah, thousands, but less than a million, millions, but less than a billion, and then the fourth and correct answer was a billion people or more.
Yeah.
So it answered millions, that order of magnitude, rather than the billion or more. And this is
Interesting.
probably because there's no quantitative data in the literature
Mm.
with like a hard number of an estimate. And I mentioned
Mm.
that last time that kind of my wish list of research projects would be a detailed quantitative study that tries to estimate the um, kind of the extent of thought reform and victimization or coercion
Mm.
victimization in the world. So I thought, and then it had answered the millions order of magnitude. So I was actually having a conversation with it afterwards and telling it, that was a reasonable guess. Yeah, so it was close to a perfect score, but uh,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I believe you got the original number from me because I think it came from the Open Minds Foundation when I was making an estimate. And so it was, I remember a conversation one afternoon where I was asked how many people did I think were being manipulated. And I kind of went, well, at least 10% of the population, probably more. And that was, a starting number. So
Yeah,
not,
and that statistic, that 800 million, or
mm,
the 10% number that you're referring to
mm.
might have been in its training data. So um,
Oh, true. Yeah.
but potentially, yeah, because it was yeah.
Yeah.
So
But I mean, certainly a billion or more. You know, perhaps even the majority of people, but it depends where you set the criteria. If you're saying who is completely enslaved, then that's one thing. But to what extent are people influenced? And I think that probably we're all, to some extent, influenced by authority, and unduly so, and believe things, like people who go around reckoning we've got to drink 8 glasses of water a day or stuff like this, or toothbrushes that brush our teeth for 2 minutes, which doesn't actually come from any dental recommendation. You should brush your teeth until they're clean. But we love these heuristics and we grab onto them. But those are probably not the worst pieces of manipulation in the world. So,
yeah, how you define it definitely, and that's a difficult part of
mm,
doing a research study like that too, is how do you define who is a victim of coercion? And so the definition is the first hard part, and the second hard part is getting an accurate estimate.
mm,
And there's so
yes.
much overlap too, right? I mean, uh, like religious totalitarianism can be combined with domestic abuse, for example. So you can't count the same victim twice if you want an overall,
Mm,
like how do you tease apart the overlap as well?
yeah.
So it would get complicated, but hopefully someone can do a quantitative study like that someday.
Yeah, and you'd be a good person to talk to about it if anybody who's watching would like to do such a quantitative study, then Dustin has quite a lot of experience. Good. And from there, where would you like to go from there?
Sure. I guess as part of uh, kind of gauging like how much ChatGPT knows about thought reform and these subjects, I asked it to write some essays. So the first one was about well, my prompt was I asked it to write an essay explaining how people can defend themselves from being recruited into a psychologically manipulative group or relationship. Um, so overall, and I checked the whole essay and I didn't see any glaring misinformation.
Mm,
And here's a quote that I want to share that I thought was actually quite interesting. It said that therapists and counselors experienced in dealing with coercive control can provide guidance, emotional support, and tools for recovery. End quote. So it was aware that there are mental health professionals that specialize
mm,
in this topic. So I thought that was worth mentioning. Um, the other essay was about um, whether AI models themselves can be subjected to thought reform. So it basically said no, but there are corollaries, in
mm.
terms of like its training data being manipulated. And
Yeah.
there's technical terms that they use in like AI security work that I'm less familiar with, but um, like
Mm,
adversarial attacks and such.
mm.
So just an
Yeah.
interesting to think about, because we need to defend these artificial minds so that because they could one day be providing guidance or help to people that are dealing with coercion.
And it's interesting. I mean, the news, I think it was yesterday, um, the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, announced that he's going to introduce AI throughout the UK to, get us ahead of everyone. And I, I think it belies a certain optimism in that, um, yeah, it's rather like the belief in the singularity, this thing that's been going around in Silicon Valley for so many years. The idea that one day all the machines will get together and create a singularity, and it will be God, and it will do all the right things. And it's kind of the Enlightenment on steroids, the idea that reason will suddenly prevail. And it just, I've seen the Terminator movies. you know, I know
Right.
what's
Yeah, I've probably seen Terminator 2 like over a dozen times.
Brilliant film, just
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, I kind of wanted to talk about like AI, uh, how AI is portrayed in fiction. Because I mean, I like Terminator 2 and The Matrix just as much as the next person. But I think their biggest weaknesses are they're black and white in terms of like, AI is evil. It's going to completely destroy us or completely enslave us. And that's a very pessimistic view of the technology. So I wanted to mention some works of fiction that are either neutral or even benevolent, actually, or have more of an optimistic view of the future in terms of this technology. So the first one I mentioned is the anime masterpiece movie Ghost in the Shell. So the
Yeah,
original from 95. So that's a must watch in my
yeah,
opinion. And we're quickly heading kind of in that direction, in terms of cyborgs and such. And actually, you just mentioned the singularity. I think I won't spoil the end of the movie, but I think the end of the movie might be a more realistic um, portrayal of how the singularity um, could be. And then another anime series is Pluto. So this is a more recent one. So it's actually a reimagining of an Astro Boy arc. So that one's available on Netflix, and my wife and I watched that a couple months ago, and really our socks were blown off on how good
oh,
the world building was. So highly recommend that one. Regular movies, Bicentennial Man, starring Robin Williams.
mm,
That's a classic, and I would actually put that in the category of a benevolent or optimistic portrayal of artificial general intelligence. So that's Bicentennial Man is that movie's based on a short story by Isaac Asimov. So. And then the last one I wanted to mention was the Talos Principle, which is a puzzle video game that's critically acclaimed, and that also has a potentially good use case for artificial general
mm,
intelligence or portrayal of such. So, and I wanted to mention these because I think a lot of people can say like, well, we know it, it's kind of the false reasoning. They'll say like, well, we know AI is going to turn out bad because all the fictional works
yeah,
show these devastating apocalyptic scenarios. And I just want to share with people there's some great masterpieces out there that show that it could be different. And I
mm,
think it's important for us to imagine either neutral or positive scenarios to
mm,
maintain hope. And really, fiction can kind of help guide us in that direction, or inspire us to
mm.
make things turn out better. So um, that's what I wanted to say about that.
Yeah, and I think it's often the case, as James Joyce said, tragedy is easier than comedy. That and we will look towards the popular notions, the word utopia itself from Thomas More, meaning no such place. Um, that I read that when I was a teenager. I don't remember any of it, but um, nearly all futuristic work is dystopian. So, 1984, which he was intending to describe the Soviet state, Orwell, and I think did a pretty good job of it. And there are some very important ideas in there, like the memory hole, the idea of people's faces being rubbed off photographs. We've actually seen that in the Scientology world, where people disappear. Um, or the incredible appendix to 1984, where he talks about the use of language to deny thinking. So that my late friend Margaret Singer was also very keen on that. Then at the other end, you have Brave New World, which is the other way of manipulating people. So they're happy, they've got their soma, and they don't think outside of the box. They go to the feelies and they have pneumatic sex and they have no relationships. And Aldous Huxley, in fact, wrote a comparison called Brave New World Revisited, in I think 1954, which is 6 years after 1984 is published. He says, I was right. My friend George Orwell, Eric Blair, was wrong. This is the more likely scenario. We then have things like THX 1138, George Lucas's first movie, which most people probably haven't seen, which is a quite interesting thought as he's made so few movies. But it tends to be dystopian. I think William Morris, the arts and crafts guy, wrote a positive future, but it's just boring. Nothing happens. And because in story we like the tensions, the antagonist and the agonist, protagonist, all this sort of thing, and we are caught up in narrative. And I think it's very important to think about all of the possible consequences. And
Yeah.
I read a piece about AI last year, and I don't remember the categories, but there were four possible outcomes that were being looked at, and one was the worst case scenario, and one was the best case scenario, and in between were two probably more realistic estimations. Oh,
Yeah, yeah, kind of talking about kind of like expert forecasts. I read a paper in prep for this talk. It was a paper written by Nick Bostrom. So the title of the paper it's from 2016, Future Progress in Artificial Intelligence: A Survey of Expert Opinion. So one thing they talked about was an expert guesstimate for how human level machine intelligence would turn out. So kind of what you're referring to here.
mm,
And 31% of the experts they surveyed said that it would turn out bad or extremely bad for humanity. Now that's actually less than 50%, so actually the majority of the experts that surveyed thought it would be neutral or
mm.
overall positive. That's still a concerning number though. That's
Yeah.
nearly a third of, thought experts in the field believing this. Um, and what actually the more interesting statistic in the survey was actually the kind of a guesstimate for when we'd achieve like artificial general intelligence.
Mm,
So it was split into different confidence levels. So at the 50% confidence level, the median guesstimate was the year 2040, so 15 years from now. And the 90% confidence was the year 2075. So kind of the overall opinion of experts in the field is that it won't take before the end of the century, we'll have AI that's capable of doing anything a normal person can do.
mm.
So
We've just seen the release of the dystopian film 2073, just 2 years before that date, which looked, I haven't seen any of it, but I watched an interview with the director last night, and he was saying, well, look, I've taken real events from now and I've put them into a semi-fictional narrative to say this could go badly wrong, and not as a prediction. And I think this is important as well, that by, you know, trying to look at the future, it isn't so much a matter of prediction as understanding the possibilities and then refining down what the probabilities are.
mhm.
That's more the way we are. Um,
Yeah, and I guess my takeaway of kind of the statistics I just shared is it's not so much, it's not about causing panic. It's more just that I think it's important for general awareness of everyone that this technology could be coming a lot sooner
mm,
than we might want to accept. And of course, that means we have to take care of the security and privacy challenges as well.
mm.
Because
Which
it
we
is a
haven't done.
security, yeah, yeah. I mean, part of that's a legal thing too, right?
Mm,
That the law is always reactionary,
mm,
or it seems to be always reactionary. And this is something that, you would really think that it would be important to get ahead of this.
mm,
Because I mean, and, it's kind of hard to talk about AI and the risks and privacy and security challenges. And I wish I had more concrete advice, as someone with a PhD in cybersecurity, but I really don't because I've just, I'm not an expert in AI. I want to start thinking about the issues, but
mm,
um, it's it's important for it's hard to talk about it because it touches on every domain of human life.
mm.
There's potential security and privacy challenges in every single domain. From work to healthcare to in just these profound philosophical questions like, is it even moral or ethical to create a new being, which might be capable of suffering, and that's like, these are some weighty questions, and it's not something any one person or group can solve. So,
Yes, and we have been slow. I mean, there have certainly been a few voices. I'm trying to remember the name of the Silicon Valley guy. I read one of his books about 10 years ago, who was sounding an alarm. I think he was one of the VR pioneers or something, and was saying, and it is that point. We don't just run blithely into this. We need to talk about it. And what's more, we can't leave it to experts. And because the ethical concerns, and we've seen this often enough, Oppenheimer's critique of the Manhattan Project and his desperate plea that the hydrogen bomb should not be manufactured because of his realization. that it's too easy to start solving the puzzle without thinking about the consequences of what you've created. Would you perhaps explain artificial general intelligence, which is the goal, as opposed to artificial intelligence, which is what we're calling the current systems? What would
Yeah.
artificial general intelligence be?
Yeah. Well, I know even within the field of AI, there's controversy of how to
Mm.
define it. But I mean, this is just, my perspective, I guess. But
Yep.
I mean, I would define artificial general intelligence as it's a system that's capable of doing anything that a human can do.
Mm.
So it can do the dishes, it can get a job, it can fall in love, potentially, or in all these tasks that we think of as being uniquely human.
Mm.
But now we're starting to see these systems that are either very capable or even super intelligent. So, for example, AlphaGo is something that we should talk about because that's a super intelligent system in the domain of playing the board game Go. That's
Yeah.
something that was only in the human realm, mastering the board game of Go. But
Mm.
now we have systems that are much more capable than we are. So that's kind of the current state of AI is that it, we're trying to get it to the level of human capability in all these different domains. And then in some, or I should say many narrow domains, it can meet or exceed the expectations of how a human would perform.
Mm.
So
I mean
I'm not saying
that
that's an academic definition, but I think that's how I would explain it.
yeah, that's fair enough. I was fascinated by AlphaGo. I'm a Go player, and I understand that the number of moves on a chessboard is incredibly limited. And so is it Deep Blue that and was
Yeah,
it
I think
Garry
that was the name of it. Yeah.
Kasparov who it beat? But one can see that it can run through all of the possibilities very quickly. On a Go board, of course, you have a 19 by 19 board, and you can play anywhere on that board. So you've already got a lot of possibilities at the first move, and to run through all of the potential sequences, it's so much bigger. And so to have actually, I think it was a Hananbo champion who was so the world champion who was beaten, the Japanese world champion, I should say, who was beaten by AlphaGo, and it really was a new benchmark, really something new had
Yeah,
been achieved.
the sent shockwaves in the throughout the world really in
Mm.
2016. And kind of what you're referring to is like when you think of the mathematical complexity of a game, a lot of it's the board states. So they say that
Mm.
there's more board states in Go than there are atoms in the universe.
Yeah.
So it's not possible to brute force and search through every single board state,
Mm.
which is why it's so much different than chess. And it took, approximately 2 decades more. Yeah, 2 decades more
Mm.
to solve Go with AI compared to chess. Although I do want to mention, if you research AlphaGo, sometimes headlines will mistakenly call Go the world's most complex board game, which is just misinformation. That I was doing background research, and it turns out mathematically the world's most complicated game is Magic the Gathering, the trading card game.
There
So
we go.
yeah, and yeah, and just to illustrate that even just the act of building a deck in Magic the Gathering is quite complex, and there's a 300-page rule book with 2,000 rules. And then just a really fun fact, and I find this really profound. Magic the Gathering is Turing complete. So in
Mm.
computer science, and to make it simple, Turing completeness means so if a system is Turing complete, you can do any general computation on it. So you could run the Windows operating system with Magic the Gathering cards, theoretically. And Go is not Turing complete. So
Yeah. So
um,
yeah. So when my Windows 10 dies, I'll be able to use Magic of the Gathering to
in
oh
theory.
that or Linux.
So I guess yeah, on the subject of Go, if people want to learn more about AlphaGo and kind of its legacy, there's a really great documentary available for free on YouTube. So it's called AlphaGo the movie. So I'm pretty sure that's free to
Mm.
watch with ads. Highly recommend it. I mean, yeah, it's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. Um, and that focuses on the showdown between the AlphaGo system and Lee Sedol.
Mm.
So who was considered or is considered the top Go player in the world. So it
Yeah.
was a best of five match, and um, so yeah, I won't spoil it, but very inspiring
Mm.
film.
Cool.
Um,
I'll look that out. Sounds fascinating.
mhm. One thing I wanted to mention about Go was that kind of what experts, or it seemed to come a lot sooner than many people were expecting.
Mm,
So I found this MIT Technology Review article that came out around the time that the the showdown match between Lee Sedol and AlphaGo was going on. And I'm going to quote from the article here. It said, just a couple of years ago, in fact, most Go players and game programmers believed the game was so complex that it would take several decades before computers might reach the standard of a human expert player. So again, and then it only happened a few years, or it happened a lot sooner than the several decades. Let's put it that way. So again, I just want to, the reason why I wanted to share that is that these advancements can happen very fast.
mm,
And so I think it is important to keep in mind that, those dates that I was mentioning before, like the year 2040 or the year 2075, these might be realistic estimates
mm.
because of how quickly these things can progress.
Yeah.
So
Where else would you like to take us?
uh, I got some notes. Let me look.
I knew you
Um,
had.
yeah. Um, oh, I looked at some Pew Research Center data
Mm,
about kind of public sentiment about AI, and the concern for okay, so between the year 2022 and 2023, 14% more people expressed concern over
mm.
AI, and kind of this is, you can directly tie this to the release of ChatGPT in late 2022.
Yeah.
And and we're talking about these major milestones in the advancement of AI. I mean, AlphaGo was in 2016. ChatGPT is probably the next big like thing that many people have thought about or experimented with. Um, and kind of in that also that Pew Research Center data. So the majority of Americans, 62%, said that they believe that AI will have a major impact on workers in general. However, only 28% of them thought it would impact them personally in a major way. So, and this is a classic example of the optimism bias
Isn't it? Yeah.
from social psychology. I mean,
Mm,
they're already talking about automating certain parts of like software development,
mm,
PhD level research. I've seen articles talking about the formulation of, research questions or literature reviews that AI are starting to gain competence in these areas.
mm,
Um, and I mean, ChatGPT can pass the bar exam. It passes the medical licensure exam here in the US, called the USMLE. So it's, yeah, the medical licensing examination. I was just researching this recently because I wasn't aware of this, but it's the exam you have to take to become a licensed physician
mm,
in the US. So ChatGPT scored 90% accuracy or more in all three parts of the test, which sounds pretty remarkable to me because,
mm.
we consider these professional fields that are supposed to be very hard for most humans to achieve competency in. And now, um, these large language models are, you know, um, displaying competency in these areas. So it's quite profound. Um, the last one I saw was the the qualifying exam for the International Mathematics Olympiad. So recently there was a advancement with ChatGPT where it scored 83.3% of the questions correctly, compared to only 13% with a previous model. So that was kind of a hard problem in recent years, was getting ChatGPT to reason mathematically. So they're making leaps and bounds in that area as well. A whole 80% difference in capability there. Um, so so yeah. What do you think? I mean,
Yeah. Well,
I
let
think it's
me.
all very profound.
It
But
certainly is. Uh, I'm reminded of the brilliant science fiction author John Sladek, who in the 1970s, on the sleeve note to one of his books, explained that I mean, he wrote about nanobots in a book called The Reproductive System in the 70s, and the Müller effect, which is a remarkable idea of a man being digitized and then the man dies and they seek to reconstruct him. In the 70s, he's thinking these things. But he said on one of his books that he was looking forward to the day when computers would be able to make art and write poetry and literature, so that human beings would be free to do what they really want to do, which is to add up numbers. Uh, the the impacts of this, when I was at art college in the 70s, I heard that the Dutch had a scheme whereby artists didn't have to apply for jobs. They would get their welfare money, their dole money for being artists. And I thought, well, this is probably a good idea. And it started me thinking about the future. This is around the time that Fiat started putting robots into their factories in Italy. And I was sort of going, well, the robots will come in. There'll be less need for pointless manual labor, for tedious manual labor. This should mean a change in society where we are served, all watched over by machines of loving grace, to use Richard Brautigan's expression about it. And we are seeing absolutely nothing in our social structure that accepts this. What we're actually seeing is that the money is percolating to the top, the plutocratic influence. We are on a planet that is largely ruled by the super rich, whether we look at the richest of them all, which is probably Putin. Sorry, Elon Musk. I think he's got more than you have. Xi, these people are immensely personally rich and have way too much power. And I wonder if artificial general intelligence will lead to conscience within AGI, so that the machines are going, this is in fact wrong. The idea that human beings should be able to stock up enough material for them to live 1,000 lifetimes while there are other people who are starving. And what's going to happen when all those driverless Tesla trucks are chucking our Amazon parcels at us? We don't seem to be looking at that future and saying total employment is not the idea. We should be training people in crafts and skills so that they can occupy their time with something other than alcohol and drugs and TV. And that distinct separation, and then the integration, the cybernetic integration, where, other than the Terminator situation, of course, where they just wipe us all out, that we do seem to have the potential of utopia. We have the potential of actually controlling climate change, of actually getting our agriculture working so that it's not destructive in the way that it is at the moment, your agribusiness. I'm not really seeing anything, any major move in that direction. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't profess to be a policy expert
No, of course not.
or anything, but I mean, one thing they talk about in the literature and that AI experts or futurists in general will talk about is, yeah, the future of work. And that's one thing you were alluding to is if AI is doing all or most of manual labor or truck driving or maybe we'll even someday have androids in our homes doing the dishes and the laundry and stuff. How are people going to occupy their time? Will people be happier? Do we need employment to have a sense of purpose? And so and you were mentioning wealth inequality as well. So another idea that gets floated around is universal basic income.
Of course.
So that would be the idea that AI will advance to a point where there just aren't enough jobs for people. So that's kind of what some futurists will say is likely to happen. And then we might need some kind of some system where we give people money just so that they can continue living. So again, I wouldn't. I mean, there's a lot of talk about that. I'm not up to date on kind of the pilot programs for that or how it would how would you pay for that, and of course there's ethical concerns as well. But that might be a potential solution for this wealth inequality that you're referring to, because there will come a time when if someone, let's say someone has been truck driving their entire life, if it is possible to completely automate, driving truck, maybe they won't be able to make a living anymore in that career field. So, how do we assist this person compassionately? And it's not just what we consider low skilled jobs. I was mentioning earlier that PhD level research may become either fully or at least largely automated. So there might just be a lack of career opportunities in many different fields. So
and it's then opening up blue skies thinking for people, and but I see a potentially incredibly different society, and I can see that it might be the Morlocks and people coming up at night to eat us, who live underground. That you have this division in society that does seem to be possible, especially with the rise of populism, and absurd ideas. I'm not going to mention anything about Greenland because I've been told off for that kind of thing. But absurd ideas are floating around, and the idea of have you seen Jean-Pierre Jeunet's film Big Bug?
No, I don't think I've heard of it.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. He made Amelie, Delicatessen, City of Lost Children, The Long Engagement, just a series of wonderful, humorous but intelligent films. And Big Bug is his take on what happens with the singularity. And it's a very funny film, and it's worth it just for the beauty of the playing and the script and the machines in it and the CGI. But and he has a sort of ironic take, you might say. But it would be good to see something, yeah, as you started out by talking about, mentioning 4 positive films that people might look to. And I think it's also important that we're perhaps moving away. What has happened in the last 70 years is increasing specialization. I think it was the 17th century, when I think it was said that John Locke was the last man to know everything. That, whatever could be known, he knew. And since then, science is just got, just looking at trying to be a specialist in the field of history, that you will know about just this 50-year period or what have you, or just about the Second World War or something like that. We've become increasingly specialized, and this might be a chance for people to actually pursue their real interests, to follow their bliss, as Joseph Campbell would have it, and have a society where people are focused not so much upon the needs of eating and surviving, which of course a third of the world are still having to focus on a daily basis. Even in first world countries such as the US and the UK, you still have a poverty level of around 20%. But it might be possible to overcome all of that and to create a future where people are, it's not like, a retirement home where they're all going to go and play bowls, though there's nothing wrong with playing bowls, so I don't think my back's good enough for it. But that there will be some kind of development. I suppose the other futuristic novel would be The Glass Bead Game by Hermann Hesse. The idea that there could come a time where we have no creativity left, and all we have is the memory of this, which is played out in the glass bead game by these monks who also run the world. But creating a harmonious society where there is enough for everyone, and where people can excel, not simply in what we have seen, the plutocrats, Zuckerberg, Bezos, Musk, Gates, what have you, seem largely to have depended, in fact, on chance. They got lucky. They were at the right place at the right time. It's not because Elon Musk is a genius and has made brilliant developments, though he does say that it's him who decided that when he was asked by Joe Rogan about the SpaceX rocket, and he's the chief designer at SpaceX, and he said what he'd added was a pointy tip, and because the top of a rocket shouldn't be round. And I think the design of the truck, that thing that looks like a kind of 1960s Lego car, I think that came from him too. So a society in which merit is actually recognized, where people who've done something helpful or good or had a great idea get something rather than having Steve Jobs come along and steal it from them. Maybe AGI will, of course, give us a justice system that's based on that. I hadn't even thought about this. That cases will be tried in those terms. And hopefully, my late friend Alan Shefflin's social influence model will be taken into account by the courts at last. How much was the person influenced to do this, and by whom? Which gets into our subject area. Yeah, it's a can of worms, isn't it? You've got me thinking about it, you've stimulated thought, which has got to be a good thing, probably.
Hmm.
Yeah. Do you have anything to reflect on that, or do you have more notes for me?
Um, I mean, I would just say that I don't think it's not too late to give up hope that these advancements in AI can be used for benevolent purposes, more
Mm,
compassionate ends, addressing wealth inequality, like you were mentioning, overcoming poverty.
mm,
And again, this touches upon every domain of human life, which is why it's so hard to talk about. I mean, you were just kind of alluding to like integrating AI into the justice system.
mm,
And of course, there's the whole topic of advancements in medicine as well. Um, so yeah, and then that's one reason why I wanted to talk about AI today with you is
mm,
that these things are happening, whether and it's just a matter of degree of how much a person is paying attention to them. But um, I think we're living in an important time or a time of increasingly fast change,
mm,
and I think basic awareness is kind of the starting point for engaging with the topic and making sure that we steer the technology to the in the direction that we want. And I agree with you that it would be great to see a world where people can increasingly not have to pay attention to basic survival needs, but can instead follow their dreams and passions.
mm,
'Cause, I mean, that's a true beauty of human life, is people making great art or helping people around them, whatever their passion is, you
mm,
know, and maybe AGI can help us achieve that world, where there's less need for manual labor, or there could be more resources and wealth for everyone potentially.
mm.
So,
Yeah. I mean, talking about universal basic income, there are studies, I think, in Spain, Canada, and Finland that I've seen mentioned. And the Finnish study was particularly interesting. They said that there was no benefit in more employment, that people didn't go and get jobs, which was interesting. But there was a tremendous benefit in mental health, and that the mental health systems, which are now, we are in trouble in this world, that because the most significant cause of depression and anxiety is lack of money. It's like,
who
there's
knew?
a cure. So yeah, the reluctance, it's sort of, well, rather than having a lot of people policing the welfare system and catching the cheats and telling you how many letters you've got to write. It's like we've come to this point now where if you apply for a job, the poor people are getting 1,000 applications because in this country, the welfare system demands that everybody who's on welfare and not disabled in some way has to make a certain amount of applications. These applications are now being read by AI. And so you can in turn write your applications using AI to make sure that you use the right keywords, and we can all lie as much as we like to get ourselves into position. So if you take that overwhelming sort of Protestant work ethic, the idea that everybody's got to have a job, even if that job is just taking widgets out of one box and putting them into another box. I mean, my dad was in the army in World War II, and as a sergeant major, he had people painting the coal white because, of course, the British Army just stayed and waited from Dunkirk to the Normandy landings. So you've got to have the soldiers do something useful. So they painted the coal white, and it made it look a lot better. I'm not sure that and they had them cutting the grass with nail scissors and, stuff like this. So getting away from that. And I do think that it is psychologically incredibly significant to be able to do something that has meaning to you, whether that's your hobby or your work. I've never had a hobby, I don't think. Everything I do, I seek to do seriously. And there's too much of it, because I chose to do too many things. I'm actually a painter. I write fiction. I play drums, I sing, and I write things about Scientology for some reason. Most recently, I've spent the last 4 months studying Madame Blavatsky, Aleister Crowley, and the Nazis, and trying to understand how these ideas percolated through and ended in the Holocaust, and how they're affecting modern times. But I find it easy to be overly busy in my mind. I think we have a society which tends to make people spectators, tends to make people voyeurs. We're told that people spend, on average, about 6 hours of their day watching television or on screen doing something. And older people, it's more likely to be TV. I think with most of us, it's YouTube now, really, isn't it?
Yeah, or social media, especially the
Yeah.
younger generation. I just couldn't imagine spending 6 hours on Facebook, but some people do.
It's incredible. I have social media platforms, and I'm going to admit publicly that other people manage them for me, and because there just is not time to deal with all these things. Somebody brought me a question. I'd made this facetious comment about Madame Blavatsky saying that the Aryan peoples had bred with orangutans, and this theosophist was incensed and came on and said, "How dare you speak? This doesn't say anything about that in the 1,500 pages of the secret doctrine." And having the sort of idiotic mind I have, I had to answer that question, and I hadn't made a note of it. And so I had to go through the secret doctrine using various search terms, and it all in all, it was over a 3-day period. I kept coming back and doing this until I found the point where she starts talking about people covered in red hair, who are the outcome of miscegenation, of interbreeding. And see, my point was, if the Aryans were so clever, why were they having sex with orangutans in the first place? But Hitler didn't think about that, obviously. And they were trying to breed this out. Of course, this is the big secret of the Nazis, the Lebensborn, the idea that you could breed back superhuman powers into Aryans by kidnapping blonde-haired, blue-eyed women and having SS officers have sex with them. And I've said this often enough before, but Anna Fried in ABBA was a Lebensborn child. So she may have superpowers. Probably not. Right. Have you got anything else on in your notes there to
No, I mean that pretty much. I mean, of course, there's always more to say, but I think I kind of got my main talking points out. I know you had mentioned before we started recording that there was something that you wanted to talk about related to security and privacy. So,
yeah, in 2015, a private detective was convicted in New York for hacking the emails of Tony Ortega, the proprietor of the underground bunker, and my late friend Mike Grinder. And when it was pointed out to the judge that these two people, one of them in New York, one of them in Florida, were both being hacked by the same guy, and that this could have something to do with Scientology and the fact that they were both loudly protesting Scientology, the judge didn't bother to initiate any kind of investigation. So I don't think people realize just how accessible their data is. And so I wondered if you had any tips to make it harder for Scientologists or anybody else, in fact, to get into your email to find out what you're searching for online. So do you have any suggestions there?
yeah, well, the first thing I would say is in terms of online accounts, your email is probably the most important one. I mean, it's up there with like your bank or finances because you use your email for password resets on all your other websites. So your email should be the first thing you have in mind to secure. We talk about this all the time in the security field, and it's true, but unique passwords on all your accounts. That's step number one.
Yeah.
If you don't want to do all your accounts because it's too overwhelming, just start with your most important ones. So unique passwords on anything that matters to you. So that'd be your email, your finances, probably any social media accounts where you have a large presence, and so on. I mean, two-factor authentication is probably step number 2 for email. But Honestly, in terms of email hacking, a lot of it's probably not technical. I don't know about the specific scenario that you mentioned, but
Mm.
it probably was due to social engineering. So, it was probably a psychological attack. So people probably often get messages saying you have a Amazon package that failed to be delivered. Log in here to check on it. So it could have been an attack like that, where
Mm.
stolen credentials with some kind of cover story like that. Um, so
I
so
think
that's what I
this
would say. Is
was a direct hack into their email, and so is it safer to, we have things like Hushmail, Proton Mail. Are is it safe to have a non-cloud email like Proton?
I mean, I think having a strong password is probably more important than the
Mm.
specific email provider. I mean, Proton Mail is known as the more private
Mm.
alternative to Google.
Mm.
But I mean, Proton Mail offers end-to-end encryption, if people are worried about being eavesdropped on
Mm.
in their email conversations. But um, I mean, that's what I would say is it those three things I mentioned. So, and when I was mentioning social engineering, I mean becoming aware of how social engineering attacks are or phishing attacks. It's probably that's what the email social engineering form is called, is phishing. So that's with a
Yep.
PH, so
Yep.
PHISHING. So there's a lot of stories and resources out there for like phishing awareness
Mm.
to kind of get a sense of like the forms those attacks take, because most email hacking incidents are probably the phishing form. If it was more technical, it might have been stolen credentials.
Mm.
So that'd be like if you repeat your email password with some third-party website that gets breached, and then that hacker can just take the password that was breached from that third-party website and then use it to log into your email. So that's why, again, that goes back to it's very important to use a unique password for
Mm.
your important accounts, because
And
then your important accounts are only as secure as the weakest, in terms of security, the weakest website that you've repeated that password on.
mm, it's a fair point. Um, and where should you keep your passwords to make them safe?
Yeah.
Are
I mean, a lot of
keychains
people.
good?
Well, a lot of people in the security industry, and myself included, we use password managers, and there's many different options out there. So a password manager is kind of it's a file that you either keep in the cloud or on your computer locally, where you store all your passwords.
Mm.
So the first thought someone might have is like, wow, well then if someone gets the password to your password manager, then they have the keys to the kingdom, and that may be true, but this is actually superior than kind of the status quo, which is that or I shouldn't say most, I think it's about 30%. It's been a while since I've seen statistics on this, but I think it's about 30% of people will repeat either a few passwords or the same password on all their websites.
Yeah.
So when you're comparing maintaining a password manager to that reality, the password manager is far superior, because most hackers won't have direct access to your system.
Mm.
They're going to be getting your passwords from breached websites because it's a lot easier. Um, and again, there's many different options for the password manager.
Where do
But
you keep the password to your password manager?
it just pick something very strong, and I guess I could give advice for making strong passwords. I guess like for the password for your password manager, you could use like a passphrase. So maybe that's like 8 or 9 words that you type out. So that's a bit easier than memorizing something that doesn't have meaning. Um, and the password managers often have features where they'll automatically generate a strong, unique password for
Mm.
you. And if you rely on your password manager, then you don't have to memorize all your passwords.
Mm.
So you memorize one password rather than dozens.
Mm.
Because I mean, let's face it, no human can, well, there are some special people that could, but I mean, most people can't memorize 50, 60, 70 unique passwords that are all strong.
Yeah,
It's
we
just
come
not
come
possible
to
for most people.
the autistic guy who managed to calculate pi to 2,000
Yeah, yeah,
digits.
but
He could remember
yeah,
them.
but
Yeah.
yeah, most people don't
Kim
have
Peek
that
could do
gift.
it.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
so
Well,
that yeah,
thanks very
so
much. We'll get together again in a few months and think some more about these issues and whatever else you've been thinking about. This has been very enlightening. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, pleasure. And when we put this up, if you make comments, then we will let Dustin know that you've done that. And if he chooses can respond to those comments. So if you have any questions, and there might well be, subjects for debate that come into Dustin's special area, which is cybersecurity, and we'd be happy to take those on. Thank you very much for watching. Hi, John here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much.